Ahead of Turkiye's presidential vote, many analysts in the Western media predicted an almost certain loss for President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. So how did they get it so wrong? Welcome to the program. I'm Philip Hampshire. Turkiye's election is heading for a second-round runoff after neither President Erdogan nor his main challenger, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, managed to attract more than 50% of the vote. However, Erdogan now appears the clear favourite to win another term. Anyone who was only following the political predictions made by the Western media, it's an outcome that may seem like an upset. So, exactly why was the analysis in the West so at odds with the political reality in Turkey? To discuss this further in Washington, D.C., I'm joined by Richard Outzen, who's a retired U.S. colonel and geopolitical consultant and non-resident at the Atlantic Council. Meanwhile, in Istanbul, we have Mehmet Çelik, who is an editorial coordinator at the Daily Sabah. And in Izmir, in Turkey, we have Klaus Jürgens, who's a European affairs analyst. And finally, in Istanbul, we're joined by Vebi Beysan, who is an associate professor of history at the Ibn Haldun University. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. If I could start off, Richard, with you. As you see it, Richard, why do you think that all of the pre-election analysis from experts out there got the result in the first round of the election so wrong?
I think really the Western punditry got three things wrong: the moment, the candidate, and the Turkish electorate. And what I mean by that is the moment has not been primarily shaped for Turkish voters, as best I can tell, by the economic distress. And of course, President Erdogan's approach to exchange rates and monetary policy are a major driver of that. And in the American electorate, the pressures caused by that, both in terms of inflation and inability to buy foreign goods, would have been determinative, because the American moment in politics is often shaped by the economy. But Turkey's a very geopolitical electorate, and I think most people miss that. They're shaped a lot by their sense of what's going on around them and the relative balance of power globally and in the region. So I think most Western pundits discounted that. The second thing is they got the candidate wrong. I mean, I think they really misunderstood some of the shortcomings in Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu as an opposition candidate. The issue that, or the issues that Meral Akşener and others identified, sort of the trouble in wrangling together this coalition. While it was a very impressive political feat in terms of Turkish history to get this table of six put together, the average Turkish voter does not seem to have been impressed by Kılıçdaroğlu as a candidate nearly as much as the Western pundits themselves did. And then the third thing is, as I mentioned, the Turkish electorate. Unlike Western European or the U.S. electorates, it's still a very center-right electorate. You've got a strong nationalist base, you've got a strong pious base, and then on top of that, you've got business conservatives. I think between 50% and two-thirds of the electorate could be considered to be conservative. They're very risk-averse. And for Americans, after 20 years of the AKP, it was time for change. But for the risk-averse Turkish electorate, they wait and see what's the quality of coming to replace. So I think all three of those things led to a misunderstanding of dynamics.
Mehmet, is that how you see it as well?
I think definitely there is a misreading of the Turkish electorate. And you know, if we were to divide this misreading into two poles, one being the punditry and the media, and the others would be the political circles in the West. So, you know, when it comes to media, I think there is this lack of diversity in the source of information that they receive, which leads them ultimately to miscalculations or their analysis not being on target. So when they come, the punditry or the media, when they analyze Turkish electorate, Turkish society, or Turkish politics, I think their framing is very narrow, and they tend to be very influenced only by the opposition circles, and they're fed by their rhetoric or by their argument. So I think diversification of that information and their sources would be in their benefit for the future. But nevertheless, this is not the first time that they have actually supported the wrong candidate. In this election, they were a little bit more aggressive. They were more transparent. They were more actually explicit in who to endorse or who they would like to see to be endorsed by the mainstream Western media, and they miscalculated this. Secondly, I think we should understand the political circles in the West and who they would like to see as being the next leader in Turkey versus who the electorate wants to see. If we were to see, if we look at this from the Western political circles perspective, we see that they would like a change in Turkey because there is a figure that challenges the status quo of the international governance, and this is not something that they would like to see when it comes to who Turkey should be ruled by. On the other hand, we see a leader that is being supported by the majority of the society who challenges this status quo, but on the other hand, he also does not, there's this new sense of patriotism, or many call it nationalism in Turkey, but actually it's a reactionary sense of nationalism in the face of many threats, which is, mostly security threats, and hence why they have put their foot on the ground and stood against this Western rhetoric by supporting President Erdogan, also by not supporting Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, who has sided with the HDP, for example, which is seen in the eyes of many Turkish electorate as an offshoot of the PKK terrorist organization. So there is this, I think, two-pole or two-dimensional misreading. One is from the political circles in the West, and two is by the media. And I think it is time that, to put forward better analysis for the Western media to diversify their sources, to take a step back and try to understand the Turkish society or Turkish electorate, why they are still voting for Mr. Erdogan, despite some of the political or economic challenges that the nation is facing.
Klaus, I've got a quote for you here. This one's from Sunan Chidi. Sunan Chidi is an associate professor of national security studies at the Marine Corps University, and it was the writer of a foreign policy piece. So, what happened? There was altogether too much focus on polls, too much Twitter navel-gazing, too much cheerleading, and too little attention to Erdogan's advantages and Kılıçdaroğlu's weaknesses. Klaus, do you think that that's a reasonable appraisal of what happened, or do you think something else went on here?
I think the foreign policy got it pretty much right. And what my colleagues mentioned before me, I think this is a key point. If you really want to understand modern Turkey, you should not come here or live here already with preconceived notions, follow only one side of the political spectrum, maybe because that's your personal choice, maybe because you just want to engage a little bit in opposition backing, because that's how you grew up in student movements like we all did. There's no problem whatsoever. But if you come here, or if you live here, and if you comment about the elections, you should really take a look at what the electorate actually wants. I was traveling for 5 weeks before the elections, spoke with everyone from across the board, opposition and government and what have you. I went to the earthquake zone one more time. Now, this is not the point, but you have to understand that there are a lot of achievements in the past 20 years. And if your preconceived notion is, nothing has happened, Turkey is no democracy, no economic reforms, no social welfare, no nothing, then you basically try to put Turkey back 20 years or even 25 years as if nothing has happened ever since 2002. Fair enough. If this is your viewpoint, democracy is democracy, then please have it. But if you write about this country, you must talk with the people who actually live here and vote here, and they will tell you a completely different story. Now, this is why I'm so upset, and I'm rarely upset. You guys know me a little bit. I'm normally more diplomatic in my wordings, but I've seen, even on election night, a number of international TV stations with their usual headlines. Erdogan is going to lose, a big catastrophe here, as if the country has crumbled. We had The Economist, we had all this and that. Please, colleagues, come here. If I would do the same in your country, now what would be the result? So I fully agree. I think the first question was national surveys got it wrong, I think, but this is normal. This would happen in Germany too. You have surveys according to party political preference. Don't get me wrong if I say this very openly, but I mentioned this. Of course, at some point, the leader of the opposition was far ahead, and it transpired very quickly. Of course, these figures did not transfer to reality. This is not what I really want to talk about. The international dimension is what I want to talk about.
Hold on a second, Klaus.
Far too long. I know.
We'll get back to that in a second, because I'm going to ask you in a second if this was wishful thinking by the Western media. But first, let me drag in Vebi, because he hasn't had a chance to speak yet. Vebi, what was your take on why the international media seem to get this so wrong? And the international punditry, after all, this is their job. This is what they're paid for.
Well, it's not only the international media got it wrong. Also, locally in Turkey, a lot of these companies doing polls got it wrong. So it's very important to mention that too. Now, let me talk about the international one. It's very important. I think you cannot just sit in thousands of miles away and don't know much about Turkey and try to make predictions, or else rely on third persons, and I think there are like probably a dozen or two of them, and I can see that they were really vocal on expressing their opinion about Turkey's future, without the international media taking into consideration that they may be a good academics living in the US or somewhere in UK or Europe. They're not necessarily been in Turkey for the last 10, 15, 20 years. And of course, they are free to choose their side and showing kind of polishing one side and kind of ignoring the other side. I think that's why. But what we would expect with their academic background and the capacity and capabilities, that they would come up with a not so biased and a more just predictions or even discourse. But unfortunately, this did not happen, and some of them, including the person you just mentioned, I know personally, and they just, tried to play on the international community's viewpoint, right, as if they are the voters, which they're not. And also, when we go back to Turkey, obviously they had many points, especially the economy. And this disastrous earthquake, where the death toll officially a bit over 50,000, but probably it's much higher than that. And they thought that this is like presenting a success in a golden plate. But now election results prove that Mr. Erdogan also increased his votes in those earthquake damaged areas. So we have something else going on in Turkey. And probably international media should have taken the liberty and come here and observe it closely themselves and try to understand what was going on. I think that was their mistake. Well, when it comes to the polls, companies based in Turkey, a couple of years ago, one of them gave a talk at our university. It was a small group of people, and I was shocked to learn that actually their market share is not that great. At that time, he mentioned 17%. So probably Mr. Erdogan was getting, whichever the other companies has bigger market share, probably in international ones, were probably getting healthier results. So that's also a possibility. But in the Turkish media, those poll companies, which were every night on televisions, almost presenting daily results that who would win. And I'm not sure ever this affected the voters' view, changed anything there. But nevertheless, this was the case in Turkey. And now the results proven that people, the voters in Turkey, had much different concerns. For example,
well, hold on a second. I'm very sorry, Vebi, to cut you off there, but let me bring in a graphic that we have here. This is a tweet that was put out by Ibrahim Kalin, who is Turkiye's presidential spokesperson, and it's a collage of 6 different front covers from magazines over the course of the last month. One from Profil, one from L'Express, one from The Economist, Le Point, Der Spiegel and various others as well. And as you look at them, each of them is saying this is Turkey's most important election and we're expecting Erdogan to lose, that kind of thing. So, Klaus, wishful thinking from the Western media, is that what this is? There seems to be a history over the last decade, Klaus. We can go back, we can look at Brexit. The media got it wrong on that. We could go back, we could look at the Donald Trump election against Hillary Clinton. The media got it wrong on that and got very angry about the fact that they got it wrong as well. We could look at Jair Bolsonaro, we could look at Viktor Orban in Hungary. The media seems to be engaging, well, is it wishful thinking? What is it, Klaus?
I think it is not. It is wishful thinking, absolutely. It is not based on facts. These 6 cover pages, and I could add a number more, and one I definitely will not add, which is from a French so-called satirical magazine, which does not deserve to even being mentioned on our television station here. Now, wishful thinking based on 2 things, and I'm often asked here and somewhere else, Klaus, when did it all start that Europeans in particular became afraid of a successful, modern, democratic Turkey? And I say, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. The second question is, when did this obsession with one leading, charismatic, much cherished politician over here, the incumbent President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, actually start? Why single out a nation, a person? Is it because you are afraid of? And last Sunday, I took the liberty to put it into very, very frank words, and I hope I might not get into trouble repeating it here. I said, Turkey is no longer the kid. By this, I mean you can pat it on the shoulder, give it billions for refugee questions. You can say, wonderful, we keep you in the waiting room for EU accession for another 50 years. But here, something has happened. The electorate has fought. The electorate is thinking twice. And many people, and I think I can say this from where I'm actually commenting, even a fair number of members of normally opposition voters would actually say, well, have we not come a long way? Is Turkey not a stronger, much more respected nation than it was decades ago? I think this thought train is slowly starting. And you know what is the most amazing thing? So many commenters abroad said there will be mayhem after the elections. There will be chaos in the street. There will be riots. Oh, my dear friends, come down here. Come to various parts of the country. It is democracy 2-0. One day you lose, one day you win. And amazing. So wishful thinking, but may I add one word, deliberate wishful thinking.
Richard, would you be in agreement in that? I mean, wishful thinking in the media, you can imagine that in Europe, they've got a little bit more of a reason that they should have been in Turkey talking to people. What was the situation like in the States?
Well, so, I agree with my colleague's assessment, and I think I would use a different term than wishful. I would call it narrative thinking. There's this sort of an echo chamber in which the Turkey experts, certainly in Washington, are self-referential. They speak mostly to people here in Washington who talk about Turkey. Some of them talk to Turks in Turkey, but a pretty narrow segment. I think Klaus used the word fact-based. We could also just say empirical. How is it that people know what they know about Turkey or anywhere else, or about Turkiye or anywhere else? Well, you have to go and you have to admit your own bias right up front. You have to put together a model, whether you're doing polling or social science research of another nature or just policy research. And you have to, in order to make some predictions, you have to understand the fact set that you're looking at. So I think, for instance, there's this whole generation of voters that have come up that were born from 2002 or 2003 onward that are now very much a part of the Turkish electorate. Most American experts don't know them because many American experts haven't traveled to Turkiye since 2009, 2010, with the narrative that's been developing in Washington about an undemocratic Turkiye and about Erdogan being an authoritarian. It's sort of seen as something you don't do. So the polite class of political commentators instead congregate with one another and with the sharpest critics of both Turkey as a country and certainly of the AKP. So that's fine. They're entitled to their biases and they're entitled to their views. However, if they're going to try to present quality assessments about what's going to happen in Turkey or Turkish policies, what they need to do is to overcome those biases by engaging with people they don't like. And frankly, Washington's just not very good at it. So part of it's wishful, but the other part is methodological. It's narrative thinking in living in an echo chamber and not reaching out to the inconvenient facts. I would say that myself, I know a number of people who do this in other countries, some Middle Eastern experts. Not all of them are Erdogan fans. Not all of them are AKP fans. And in fact, many of them are sharply critical of that. But they at least engage on a factual basis with the people that they're trying to understand. And that means getting to know AKP voters and nationalists and things like that. To me, that's the root of the problem. It's not just being wishful. It's being sort of engaged only in the echo chamber and not strictly empirical in approach.
Mehmet, I'm going to put that to you similarly but slightly differently. Do you think the journalists sort of are, just as Richard has explained, sort of willfully refusing to talk to people that they agree with? They're refusing to talk to anyone with differing opinions. Is that what's going on here, or is there something else?
Well, I would like to think that it's not willfully. It's, for the sake of, thinking that there's still objective journalism out there. And, I would like to think that it's not deliberate. However, the outcome and the result and the analysis show a different picture. So I think, this whole symbolism in those covers that you mentioned previously, I just want to elaborate on that a little bit. It is not necessarily just targeting one person or one leader. I think through symbolism used in those pictures, there is a nation that is being targeted. In addition, there is a growing influence of Turkey in the region, and that is being targeted. But I think above all, there is symbolism behind Mr. Erdogan and growing Turkey, which actually, through those pictures, there is Islamophobia. I find that to be ignored through many analyses, but I think Islamophobia is one of the things that we need to touch upon through these imagery that is being created via Mr. Erdogan's image. And I think that is something that's also important. Is there no challenges? Is there no shortcomings of this government? Or, throughout the past 2 decades? Of course there are. Is there no things that could be developed further for the better? Of course there are. However, to ignore a whole past 20 years that has been, for the biggest part, progress towards something that is better for the average Joe on the street, be it in the defense industry or in dams and bridges, on the roads, in transportation, in health sector, in many other industries. There's many things that have changed. So focusing on one figure, I think although it limits it up for us to see that, Mr. Erdogan is being undemocratic or being an autocrat, but I think there's a bigger picture or a bigger target behind this narrowing down and naming this Mr. Erdogan. A nation's power, growing influence in the region is being targeted. Complementing what Mr. Klaus said, there is a new Turkey. And I think there is a lack of understanding this new Turkey or putting this new Turkey's growing influence into a proper equation, and dealing with this new Turkey is a challenge. And this happens,
Mehmet,
of course. Yes.
I'm really sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt. We're running out of time. I just want to bring Febi back in very quickly. Febi, what do you make of the media and how it really sort of failed to do its job here in impartially covering the election, didn't it?
Well, yes, but if we look at it from a different angle, actually, they may have helped Mr. Erdogan's election campaign, simply because the journal, the economist you just mentioned, that the democracy in Turkey, but also one of the points there was saying Erdogan must go. And also they expressed saying that Erdogan is risk to chaos. And the point said that Erdogan is like Putin, and Spiegel was saying he is invincible. Now, day and night, the Turkish televisions put these on their screens, and they were basically telling how this international conspiracy And what they're trying to do in Turkey, there is one theory that actually solidified the voters and just see a different world. What's going on? Why is that? And I remember I'm a good coffee shop attender, a Turkish coffee shop one, and over there one of our colleagues was said, well, do you think that actually they like Erdogan and they want him to stay, and that's why they're putting these headlines there, so visible? Anyway, so if you look at it from a different angle, it actually may have played a different role. But what we would expect is would be from international media, they're informing international community accurately and in a just way. But unfortunately, this was lost and they didn't do a good job.
Febi, thank you very much. Klaus, Richard, Mehmet, it's been a pleasure having you all on the show, but I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate if you head on over to our YouTube channel. Just go and search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me here and the entire team, thank you for watching and goodbye.